Hey guys, so in this video I will provide a review and footage from the Akaso EK7000 Action camera shot at 1080p, 60 frames per second. And I decided to strap this camera onto a third-party backpack strap, so it's first-person view basically from my chest. And I decided to provide footage from an outdoor park in Frederick, Maryland. The time of this video is about 7:30 a.m. in the morning, so after golden hour, but the light is pretty soft, so I wanted to test out this camera's functionality where there were still some shadows here and there. I mean, you'll see straight off the bat that that pillar in the distance is a little bit dark and it's hard to pick out the details, in part because the light is pretty soft, which is already one flaw that I noticed from this camera. Having said that, this camera is currently selling for only $60 on Amazon, and that includes a ton of accessories such as a waterproof case, as well as a device you can strap the camera to your helmet. And if you look on the website camel.com, you'll see that it actually goes as low as $40, which is pretty insane. So definitely temper your expectations. This is not one of the fancier action cameras out there. Certainly when GoPro was more popular back in the day, you could easily be spending $300, $400, or $500 on these types of cameras. To provide a little bit of a review of the camera before we go over the footage, it's very popular, especially on Amazon. There are nearly 32,000 reviews, and this camera has been on the market for quite some time. It was initially released in 2016, so it's been selling for about a decade now. And honestly, it's designed for outdoor enthusiasts who need basically a really cheap option. It shoots up to 4K video at 30 frames per second. It even takes photos at 20 megapixels. And it has a wide 170-degree lens. You can even see here in the footage, like there's not quite a fisheye effect at the edges of the video, but to get that very wide angle, there definitely needs to be some type of curvature that happens at the left and right side of the screen. Again, I shot this at 1080p at 60 frames per second, so you'll notice that the quality isn't as sharp had I set the resolution at 4K. The frame rate is pretty high though at 60 frames per second. And 1080p, while it's not as sharp as it could be, you can even see here in that little pole, there's a little bit of graininess there. It's generally good enough resolution for everyday shots or video shots. The problem I've had with 4K footage is that it just takes up a ton of space on your phone. So as I continue to walk here, I will say the camera does have some pretty good color contrast. Like you can definitely pick up the yellows and greens from the grass. I think one thing that was a little bit disappointing for me is that there's a image stabilization setting that I turned on intentionally because given this camera was strapped to my backpack and I was walking, there was obviously going to be a lot of like up and down shake naturally from my left foot going left or forward and then my right foot going forward. But even so, there's like more jitteriness than you would expect had I used an iPhone, where I feel like the image stabilization is just a lot better. This is obviously something you can correct if you buy a gimbal, which will smooth out the jitteriness from multi-directions. But if you're in the market for this camera, you probably don't want to spend too much amount of money on accessories, given that it is a budget camera to begin with. Yep, so all in all, pretty clear footage. You will again notice a little graininess like in the tree trunk until you approach a little bit closer. I think that's just a general downside of these budget cameras where unless you're shooting up pretty close, you do notice some of the flaws related to a lower resolution rate. You'll see here, if you look at the sky, there's definitely a lot of blowouts in the exposure. The sun actually wasn't that bright for 7:30 a.m. in the morning, but like half the screen is just completely whited out due to the camera's inability to just lower the saturation there. But the water looks good. I mean, you can definitely see the reflection of the homes pretty well. They look pretty sharp. I was actually walking my dog here throughout this footage. So apologies for the sometimes sudden sway in the camera angle as she was pulling me in different directions. Yeah, you'll see we're facing east here, so that problem I mentioned previously with the overexposed sky is definitely apparent, especially in the center of the frame. You even see that overexposure a little bit with the river. Alright, so here we're coming up on a bend where I'll start to face closer to the northeast or north, so the sunlight shouldn't be as directly in front of the lens as it has been over the past few minutes. You do get a little bit of that artifact on the left-hand side. It was brief, but it looked like an orange halo. Oh, there it is again. Not sure exactly why that's happening, but I did see it a few times. Again, you'll notice there's still quite a bit of shake from my walking. I did try to walk as smoothly as possible, so if you're interested in paying just a little bit of extra for better stabilization, I've heard that the Pro version of this camera addresses that better than this baseline or base level model. I haven't actually purchased that camera myself, so this is just from reviews that I've seen online. So this is facing away from the sun, and you'll notice color and shadow contrast is better. Which makes me think this camera's not great in bright light or low light situations, but if it's in between, alright, so at this point I'm coming up on a street which I will cross, and then there will be some additional footage shot in one of the neighborhoods in Frederick. There's that orange artifact again, briefly coming up on the screen. Make a left here. The license plates are coming up relatively clear. You might have to squint a little bit, but you can make out the letters and numbers. And I was probably like 8 or 9 feet away from the car, so there is still some sharpness there at 1080p. So even though I only shot about 14 minutes of footage in total, this battery is pretty decent. Like, there was an imperceptible drop in the battery life or charge even after shooting continuously for that long. Yeah, so in conclusion, I would probably give this camera a B or B minus, even factoring in for the price. I do feel like you can probably spend a little bit more with some of the competitors out there, maybe like $120 to $150. You would get better stabilization. But in terms of the camera's compactness, all of the accessories that it comes with, those are definitely a plus. And you know, you can always start off with this camera for like a year or two and upgrade it once you have more video taking footage under your belt.